The Unearthed. Written by Brandon Michael Norman. Performed by Creepyface. Arthur was so subdued by the oppressive darkness that he dared not speak until he reached a point where he could bear it no longer. Thin, slowly rocking trees loomed overhead, strewn about here and there as he walked alongside Angus, who was just as quiet as he was. The silence had to be broken.
"Christ, I hate doing this shit, man,"
he said to Angus under his breath. There was no reply. The large, brooding, weather-beaten old man just walked on, adjusting the shovel resting on his shoulder. As if silently observing them, the stone monuments lay in rows, marking the final resting places of numerous corpses, some undoubtedly now in various states of decomposition, most merely stark white skeletons. Gravestones served as an eerie marker, asserting the fact that here, the dead stayed.
"Forgot to bring my damn jacket as well. Freezing my balls off."
"Look, if you're gonna do nothing but bitch, take your shovel and piss off. I'll do it on my own and you'll get jack shit,"
Angus finally said.
"Yeah, right. As if you could lug that stiff around on your own.
"I'll sure as hell try."
The men were quiet again, staring solemnly over the rows of the dead as they walked. The moon was another quiet observer, hanging over them and casting a ghostly glow over the scene, painting the gravestones in a sickly pale silver. The two intruders felt watched as they were also bathed in the dull glow, their skin as pallid as corpses themselves. After some time, they reached their destination and stood over it for a few moments to prepare themselves for some heavy digging.
"The doc is paying us double the usual for this one, so let's get this over with and get paid. If you want out after that, then get the hell out,"
said Angus with finality. The mention of double pay seemed to raise Arthur's spirits a little.
"Is that so? Well, I guess that's okay. If he can pay us like that a little more often, I might not mind so much."
"I wouldn't mind if you shut up and started digging."
"Fuck you."
The men bent to their work, and Arthur felt a ridiculous sense of relief as the quiet of the night was held back by the thud of shovels, the shifting of the earth, and occasional grunts of effort from the grave robbers. After some time, Arthur's shovel struck wood with a muffled thump.
"Bingo,"
he said.
"About time. Let's hurry this shit up."
They spent a few more minutes digging out the remaining dirt on the coffin before Angus took a claw bar from his belt and pried open his side of the coffin before tossing it over to Arthur, who did his side. They wrenched off the loose lid and wrinkled their nose at the unpleasant odor wafting from the inside.
"Ah, lovely. They always smell so rosy,"
Arthur said.
"Yeah, well, it's worse now because it's been out here 4 days. The doc said people were coming here at odd hours, and it was too risky to send us so soon after the burial."
"Well, as long as we get paid double like you said, I don't give a damn."
"I wonder what he does with these poor bastards." "That's none of our business. If we get nosy and start asking questions, he'll get someone else. I'm sure we're better off not knowing."
They began the morbid physical task of lugging the corpse out of the coffin and the grave, straining themselves lifting the dead weight. They sat on the ground, catching their breath for a few minutes before Angus made a quick call on his cell phone, talking quietly.
"They'll be here soon,"
he said to Arthur when he was done. Sure enough, 2 or 3 minutes later, a car pulled up and Dr. Eisenberg unlocked the back doors. A graying man in his 50s, he regarded them with his usual sullen expression from the passenger seat.
"Hurry up,"
he hissed. The two men heaved the corpse into the back seat after another man, no doubt some other hireling of the doctor, opened the door. After they were done, it was shut and the driver got back in and drove off after Angus was handed an envelope. He ripped it open and counted the money, splitting it with Arthur before the two men parted to exit the graveyard in opposite directions. They hadn't gotten far before the deathly quiet of night was shattered by a frightening din not far off. It sounded like a huge crash that rattled the men's bones after the silence. They ran back towards each other.
What the fuck was that?
Breathed Arthur, his eyes wide.
The doc's car? Shit.
The two men ran in the directions of the sound and got to the wreck fast. It seemed as if the driver, for some reason or another, had swerved off the dirt path and right into a tree. Steam and smoke poured from under the crumpled hood, and the passenger side door crunched open, and Eisenberg fell out, screaming. Angus ran to him while Arthur went to check on the driver. He was dead. His head hung at an unnatural angle, and Arthur guessed he must have broken his neck with the impact.
Doc, are you alright?
Angus yelled.
Do I look like I'm fucking okay? You imbecile! I think my leg is broken.
The doctor replied, grimacing. Angus noticed a large syringe in his left hand.
What is that?
He asked. The doctor looked at the syringe and then threw it away.
Never mind that. We have to get the hell out of here. Help me up.
The doctor growled. Angus obliged, amid much grunting and exclamations of pain from the wounded man. Arthur came over and glared at the doctor.
What is all this, Doc? Where's the body? Forget it. We have to go now.
The way I see it, with that leg, you're not going anywhere unless we help you. So, you better start talking. We're involved in this shit, and this was not a part of it.
I paid you good money to just do the job and keep your trap shut,
said Eisenberg, scowling back at Arthur. Angus dropped him on the ground again, and he fell with a yelp of pain. The two men stared coldly at him, and he swallowed hard. They weren't going to give in.
Alright, fine. I've been working on something that can bring dead tissue back to life. That's what I've been using the bodies for. I thought I had it right, and that's why I paid you double for the last one. I was sure it was the last one I'd need. I was so eager that I injected the substance in the car so I could start analysis right away when we got to the lab. It usually takes some time for it to take effect. But Jesus, this one was instant. I didn't see it coming.
He finished. The two men standing over him stared, dumbfounded. Arthur chuckled slightly, trying to sound like he wasn't nervous, but his voice shook.
Well now, that's the craziest shit I've heard in a while. So, you revived a dead body. A stinking one at that. And it attacked you two, and that's why you crashed. Yes. I think you're nuts. You asked and I told you the truth, and we have to go now.
Arthur ignored him and went back to the wrecked car, searching around for the body. He couldn't see it, and he tried to maintain his composure while a sick feeling rose in his gut. He didn't know why he believed the doctor, but he did. The body had not been flung clear, and it was not in the car. He turned to Angus.
I think we should get out of here. Let's grab his sorry ass and bolt.
They walked back over to where the doctor lay, and were horrified to see him clawing at his throat, which was now slashed and gushing blood as the dying man thrashed and gurgled, drowning. They watched, stunned, as he faded and slowly turned to stare at each other, unable to speak. They looked around at the trees and the darkness stretching out where they couldn't see. Nothing moved. There wasn't even a wind anymore. Everything was so dead still that they felt their hearts would burst with terror. Without a further moment of thought, they broke into a sprint, flying in the direction of the entrance they had used in coming there. They got to a point where their breath gave in, and they had to stop. As they coughed and rasped, trying to recover, they were sent into another frenzy of running when they heard a heavy rustling sound, like someone crashing through bushes in pursuit of them. Sprinting desperately for the exit, Arthur screamed and lost his footing when something fell from a tree branch overhead and landed on Angus, who had been running right next to him. He couldn't quite see in the dark, but Angus was screaming and thrashing around while a figure was grabbing him and dragging him away into the darkness at incredible speed. He heard the screams grow fainter before they were cut off with a horrible fleshy ripping sound. Something solid and hairy had hit Arthur square in the face, and his horror was complete when he realized it was Angus's severed head that had been thrown at him. He got up, screaming continuously, and managed to run a few more steps before the fleshy, risen corpse was on him, savagely ripping off his clothes and tearing into the flesh of his abdomen. His last thoughts were of how this could have been their last job, and they would have walked away clean. And now, he was watching himself be rapidly disemboweled by a freak of nature he helped create. Soon, Arthur was lifeless, and the job was done. The previously living body stood over the grisly scene, as if admiring the handiwork. It seemed as if it still breathed in harsh, uneven gasps and growls, and held its head as if it was in pain as it walked away. The entrance to the graveyard was not far off, and it stumbled in that direction. To freedom, and whatever hell came with it. With the subsiding of the initial surge of pain, rage, and violence, the stumbling figure collapsed in the park across the street after the break for freedom. It was the shadow of a man, a pallid corpse that walked again. He knew nothing and felt nothing other than the ache in his head and the heaviness in his body. He vaguely wondered what was wrong with him. His mind was a blur of images that seemed to make no sense. He was in some or other form of shock, and he couldn't focus on anything. Even something so basic as putting one foot in front of the other. He lay still on the grass, his head spinning, his body shuddering and twitching slightly. Something was very much wrong with him, but he just couldn't put a finger on it. He struggled to think and remember, and his mind felt about as useful as a pile of mashed potatoes in this situation. He had no idea where he was, and worryingly so, he had no idea who he was. He was sick with the flickering memory of his sudden and brutally violent encounter with the men in the graveyard. His head ached, but he fought to remember. The inside of the car, the man drawing a needle out of his arm. He could make out the genuine look of surprise on the face of the man with the syringe, even as his memory struggled greatly. Then, just a blur. It was as if something else had taken over at that very moment. He had brief flashes of the sound of crunching metal, shattering glass, and screams. Another bout of blurry fury and violence, and now he was here. He could almost feel the object he had thrown into the face of one of the men. A dripping, bleeding head he had yanked clean off of its body in his extreme rage. Now, the thought of it made his head swim again, and he almost passed out. What in the goddamn hell had happened? What had the man with the syringe done to him? Had he been drawing blood from him? Or injecting something? The latter seemed to make more sense to his tortured mind. It was a wonder that anything made sense at this point. He tried to recall where he had been before he had come into the car. He found that he could not, no matter how hard he tried. His head hurt too much to think that far back. He sat up slowly, feeling despair sink in as he realized he had no idea where to go, where to even start. He got the sense that going to a random person for help would not be the best course of action, so he decided not to do that. He got up slowly, his body shaky and sore. He continued to walk slowly through the park, to the street on the other side. Across the street was a convenience store on the bottom floor of a small apartment building. The windows were dark and everything was quiet all along the street. To his left, a steep hill sloped down and he felt dizzy as a vague memory surfaced in his mind. He knew the street he was looking at. How he knew, he couldn't tell, but he immediately made his way in that direction, as anything familiar was worth investigating. Making his way down the street, he found that he was dragging himself along with great effort. He felt as if there were weights tied to his wrists and ankles, and he felt a deep nausea. Whatever had been done to him in that car was not right. Angrily, he slapped his head when he still could remember nothing, and groaned when the pain flared up. He decided not to abuse himself any further, and just put all of this thought and effort into walking. Once he reached the bottom of the steep hill he had been walking down, almost falling down, he realized he was on the right track. A road branched off to the right, and he had another surge of familiarity as he took the turn. He had a vague realization that he could smell fresh earth, and stopped to blow speckles of it from his nose. In doing so, something triggered deep in his mind, and he staggered, having to lean against a tree for support as his mind blazed. He was a dead man. Too many things added up in a horrific way, and it slammed into his gut like a powerful fist. The smell of earth, the odd, unpleasant odor hanging around himself, the way his body felt, and how ghostly pale his flesh seemed to be. It made sense now. He knew why he could remember nothing at all before he came into that car. Nothing except the vague familiarity in his surroundings. The only faces he could remember were the panicking visages of the men he had encountered in the graveyard. He had been brought back, revived from his slow decay by something highly unnatural. No doubt whatever ungodly thing was inside that syringe. He slid down the tree to sit on the grass next to the sidewalk, staring across the street at the quiet houses, hiding there, peacefully sleeping, oblivious inhabitants. He realized that if this place was so familiar to him, he must be familiar to someone here, and he thought of how problematic it might be if he was discovered here. The idea of it got him to his feet, and he kept walking. The rest of the way to his destination, he simply brooded in quiet horror of his situation. He wished deeply that he were wrong, but his mind, though flickered like a dying light bulb, told him he had hit the nail on the head. The next moment, he found himself staring at the old pale blue house. A wind blew softly past him, dragging some leaves along with a rustle, and time itself seemed to stop as his mind was driven into overdrive again. The set of wings in the front yard almost took away his ability to breathe as he saw flashes of the beautiful little blonde girl swinging back and forth.
Higher, Daddy! Higher!
He laughed with her as he held the chains of the swing and pulled it back before letting it go, as Ada shrieked with delight. The beautiful memory faded with his hands still resting on the cold metal of the front gate. So taken was he with the recollection. My name is Aiden, he said quietly. Yes, your name was Aiden, replied a sudden voice from just behind him, and he felt the steel pressed against the back of his head, the barrel of a gun piercing the darkness of the night. He could sense two more presences behind him, somehow, and he had little doubt that they were armed as well. "Who are you?" he asked. "That doesn't matter. All that matters is that you listen closely to my instructions and don't try anything funny. Unless you want your head to disappear in a flash. Okay, put your hands behind your head and slowly get on your knees. Don't fuck with me, I mean it." Aiden did as he was told, but before his knees touched the ground, his eyes grew wide as he felt that wild surge of rage and strength. Too fast for the armed figures to react, he whirled around and smashed the gun out of the hands of the figure directly behind him, with a backhand swing, sending it flying down the road and clattering away in the dark. The other two raised their weapons, and one was knocked back by the flying body of his newly disarmed companion as Aiden shoved him violently away. The last one standing was able to fire a single shot with a cough due to the suppressor on the barrel, and Aiden felt the force of the bullet whiz past his face before he was on him, jamming the barrel under the assailant's chin and pulling the trigger. There was a muffled pop and a red and gray eruption as a hole materialized at the top of the man's head, and he collapsed, dead as a sack of rocks. His rage was far from gone as he descended upon another figure, who was still trying to get up from his sitting position, and was met with a vicious kick from Aiden, shattering his nose and knocking a few teeth loose. The hit totally rang his bell, and he slumped over, unconscious. The third and final figure, the one who had their gun on Aiden, gave up trying to reach the discarded weapon lying on the ground nearby when Aiden towered over them, glaring down with a violent fury in his eyes. The figure took their helmet off and revealed themselves as a dark-haired woman, probably in her early 30s. She dropped her helmet and held up her hands in submission.
"Okay, Aiden, calm down," she said quietly. "Oh, calm down. Now I must calm down. What happened to don't fuck with me? I guess it's me you shouldn't be fucking with after all." "Look, I was just doing my job, okay? I wasn't going to shoot you." Sure. And what about your buddy over there with the hole in his head? Nothing stopped him from trying." "He probably just panicked, that's all. We were under specific orders to not hurt you, and if he had, I would have killed him myself." Tough cookie, huh? No love lost in this team, is there? Orders are orders. Can I get up so we can talk like civilized people? Slowly.
The woman got up with no sudden moves and kept her hands raised so as not to provoke Aiden into further violence. The man was not having a good night, and she knew he was on a hair trigger, and she had to play her cards carefully with him. Whatever those fucking loonies in the lab had done to him was not good, and he was too fast and too strong. The only chance she had was to try and talk him down.
Right, now you're up. Now, you're going to tell me what the fuck is going on and why you're after me. Start with what the hell is happening to me, and get straight to the point. If I smell bullshit, I'm going to knock you into dreamland like your buddy there, and I'll be gone like the wind. Okay, just listen. This would probably sound crazy to anyone other than you, after what you probably went through to get here. Now, I'm risking my entire job and the whole operation by telling you this, but I don't think I give much of a shit at this point. They've gone too far. See, I work for an organization who deal with advanced research into the revival of dead tissue, using some sort of crazy serum they developed in their labs. It's got something to do with using altered DNA from living people combined with whatever the hell that stuff is to revive deceased subjects. From what I know, they're trying to revive the subjects with aspects and abilities from the DNA of the living subject they took it from. And I know all of this because I had a thing with one of the guys in the labs. The security team otherwise works on a strict need-to-know basis. It's fucked up. But they were paying such good money that I couldn't turn it down. I have a daughter, and I'm trying to get her through college.
Aiden stared at her, his face a mask, trying to suppress his emotional reaction to everything she had just said. It was utterly insane, but it made sense. Painful sense.
I knew they did something fucked up to me, but I wasn't quite thinking on that level. Okay, say I believe everything you just said. What am I supposed to do now? Are they going to send others like you after me? Undoubtedly. They won't stop until they have you. They knew you would come straight here after they lost contact with Eisenberg. So they sent me to ambush you and try to capture you, but you're fast. We weren't expecting that. Yeah, I'm sure you weren't. So that still doesn't tell me what I should do. This is my house. My daughter. Ada, yeah. She's beautiful, you know. And so was your wife. My wife? Yeah, my wife.
Aiden struggled as the memory of Ellen came soaring back into his mind, like it had been buried somewhere deep just as he had been, and had burst from the earth and back to life.
I wish I could tell you that everything will be fine and you can go back to them soon.
I wouldn't believe you, even though I would love to.
You'd be right not to. It would be a lie. I'm sorry, I'm sorry this happened to you. I'm done with this shit from tonight. I just hope they let me go back home to my daughter in peace. But I know too much, and I doubt it. So, you're not the only one dealing with this shit.
There was a soft crackling sound and a muffled voice from the headset of one of the downed men, and the woman sighed.
They'll send backup when they can't contact us. I don't know what to tell you. They're going to roast me for failing to get you, but I can deal with that. As for you, I honestly don't know what to tell you. I know you're going to run. It's the survival instinct. Just don't kill me before you do. That's all I ask.
You seem alright, so that's not a part of the plan. If I just leave you here like this, it will be worse though. They shouldn't know that you talked to me. So, I'll have to knock you out at the very least.
Yeah, I can take it. I'm Heather, by the way. I wish we could have met under different circumstances, and despite everything, I wish you all the best with whatever you do next.
Okay, Heather. I can't really say thank you, considering all this, but I hope you get back to your daughter safe and sound.
Aiden finished. He didn't really want to strike Heather, but it was for her own good, and he knew he had to. She didn't try to resist as his fist came swinging, knocking her clean out with a single blow. He knew she would be hurting when she woke, but she would have a reason for having let him go, and he was sure that would be worth it. He sighed as he turned around and took one last long gaze at what was once his home. It was a different kind of pain, knowing that Ada and Ellen were in there, probably asleep, probably still aching inside from the loss of him, believing they would never see him again. He didn't want them seeing him like this either. He also knew that they would not be safe if he stayed near them, and so he had to get away, far away, while he waited for more enemies to come after him. He had to find the core of this organization and rip its heart out if he wanted an end to it. He needed some rest, and as he slipped away slowly into the darkness, the night was quiet again until a dark Suburban pulled up to collect the remains of the strike team sent after Aiden. They would come again, there was no doubt, and he would be ready when they did. Aiden flicked the cigarette butt out the window before he turned back to the man he had been talking to. He wiggled the screwdriver embedded to the hilt in his captive's thigh, and the man howled through the rag jammed into his mouth. A thin line of blood trickled out of the wound, and the man tightly shut his eyes when Aiden yanked the rag out of his mouth. The man's face was haggard in the dim light of the bulb hanging overhead, slightly swaying back and forth, casting odd shadows all over the dingy room.
You should realize that this shit is not stopping until you give me something. A name, a place, anything,
Aiden said.
I'm not telling you shit. They'll fucking kill me. You don't know these people.
Yeah, but I want to know them.
And what makes you so damn sure that I won't kill you right here and right now? You want something from me.
I'm not getting it though, am I?
That's also true,
said the man bound to the chair. This was a mistake, as it threw Aiden into a rage, and he swiftly snatched the screwdriver out and plunged it straight into the other thigh in one swift motion. The man screamed just as Aiden stuffed the rag back into his mouth. Aiden rested his hands on the sides of the chair the man was bound to, and stared menacingly into his captive's eyes.
Now you listen to me, asshole. I don't have the time for this shit. It's just something that's got to be done. My patience is running low now, and a wisecrack like that could just be the last one you ever make. You better give me something, or else the next place I'm jamming that screwdriver will be through the top of your fucking skull,
he threatened. He ripped the rag back out of the man's mouth, and after some gasping and grunts of pain, the man looked at him.
You better just kill me. I have a family, and if I have to die to protect them, then you better do it. If anyone gets wind of me singing any fucking song to you, my family are the first ones they'll go after, and I'm not letting that happen. The way you people talk, one would swear you work for the goddamn mob. The mob don't even deal with the shit that these people are involved in. You have no idea. No idea, huh? I'm a result of their latest fuckery. That shit they get up to in those labs are the whole reason we're here right now. I'm looking for answers, and you're looking to live and possibly go back to that family of yours in one piece. So let's help each other out. I can't, man. I can't. They'll kill them, and then me when they find me. I can't let anything happen to them. They're all I have.
The man seemed to be right on the edge of tears. The hopelessness of his situation, the fear of death, and his stress over his family was slowly breaking down his tough exterior. Aiden could see he was close to cracking. He just needed a bit more nudging.
Nothing has to happen to them. Do you understand? Nothing. You're going to help me, and I'm going to go after them, and I'll hit them before they even know I'm coming. I'll get you to your family and help you get far away from them. Do we have a deal now?
Aiden said, lessening his harsh tone. He was close. The man swallowed hard and looked around like a deer caught in a pair of headlights. Aiden spotted a slight glimmer of hope in the man's eyes as well.
You'd really do that? What if it doesn't work?
He said hesitantly.
If you can point me in the right direction, I guarantee I'll get you all out of here. As long as you stay away until it's over. And if I don't contact you to let you know it's done, you make sure to never come back here.
Aiden had struck gold with his promise, and within the next minute, he had a trail. After making swift arrangements for his former captive's departure along with his family, Aiden started to plan his move. He had learned the name of Richard Stockman, someone noteworthy among the ranks of the maniacs who ran the labs where they developed their sinister concoctions. The location of the labs was still a mystery, but Stockman would have the information Aiden needed. He knew he had to stop them at all costs, even if it was the last thing he did. Upon leaving the dingy room he had commandeered to do his dirty work, he was caught by surprise as Heather stood outside waiting for him.
What the hell are you doing here?
He gasped.
Nice to see you too. Seriously, how did you find me? It's my job to find people, Aiden. It's difficult to hide from me.
I see that.
To what do I owe the pleasure? Let me just say that there's nothing pleasant about what I have to say. I managed to get through the firestorm back at base, and they gave me another shot at catching you. Don't raise your hackles like that. I'm not about to do something that stupid.
That's preferable. I'd hate to have to hurt you.
Okay, tough guy. Now, I have some good news and bad news. I'll start with the bad because I have to. The security team has had their hands full with another crisis. Apparently, 2 other subjects infected with the latest cocktail got loose. One was gunned down during the escape, but the other...
Oh, shit.
Yeah. The good news is my men and I have been tracking it, and we're about to make a move. But I thought I might ask for your help. You say it like it's some sort of animal. Isn't it just someone like me? Just someone like you? You almost blew the head right off of one of my men, kicked the living shit out of another, and could have wiped me out in a moment if you had decided to. Thanks again for not doing that, by the way.
Don't mention it. So, is there something different about this one?
Oh yes, this one is far more aggressive and has a lot less of their mental faculties intact than you do. It's a lot closer to something primal, predatory like an animal. I'd been hearing a lot of worried discussion about it before I got loose. I think those assholes are starting to lose their grip on this little project of theirs. They've got the entire team on high alert.
Jesus. Well, what's the plan? Are we going after it?
Yeah,
Heather was cut off as a panicked voice echoed through the receiver on her radio. Aiden couldn't quite hear what was said, but he saw Heather's eyes widen.
Shit, we have to move. Get in!
She yelled, running to her car and unlocking it. Aiden had followed closely, getting in the car with her. The tires spun as Heather kicked off onto the road and roared towards their destination. She forcefully shifted gears, jamming the pedal down.
My men tried to intercept it while it was attempting to access an apartment building. It didn't sound like it went well. We have to get there, fast,
she said breathlessly.
And when we get there, we have to deal with it. And I need your help. It sounds like the situation is pretty bad already.
The situation was bad. They arrived at the apartment building in question to find the front doors damaged beyond repair. A man sat on the stairs next to the doors, his back against the wall.
Fuck, Heather,
he gasped. She ran upstairs and knelt down next to him.
Are you hurt badly? How long ago did it get in? 5 minutes. I can't feel my legs. It bit me. Shit. I'm calling for backup, okay? We have to go in and find it. You'll need to hold out until they get here,
said Heather. She took out her radio and brought it to her mouth. But before she could speak, the man on the floor screamed and his body began to convulse before he arched his back. His body became rigid and shaking until he collapsed and lay still. He slowly sat up and stared ahead, past Heather, somewhere behind her. She couldn't help but turn to try and see what he was looking at, but there was nothing there.
Coleman, are you okay? Can you hear me?
She asked. Coleman didn't respond at all. He simply stared ahead. An eerie blankness had come over his features, as if his body was there, but his mind wasn't. Heather slapped his face and shook him. No response. She stood back and stared at him worriedly.
What's wrong with him?
Aiden asked.
I'm not sure. Are you sure we should just leave him there like this? We have to go after it. Who knows how many others it will hurt?
You're right. Let's get moving.
They left the catatonic Coleman where he sat and slowly entered the lobby of the building. There was a sharp intake of breath from Heather as the power to the building was suddenly cut, and they were plunged into darkness. She fumbled with something and a flashlight clicked on to reveal a hunched figure standing 2 feet from them in the dark, groaning softly. Coleman had moved from where he sat on the stairs to right behind them within moments. He simply stood there, his mouth slightly ajar, staring through them as if they weren't even there at all. Heather slowly backed away from him and motioned for Aiden to follow her upstairs to the next floor. Halfway up the second flight of stairs, the flashlight revealed another figure, standing at the top of the stairs. It was a young woman. She swayed slightly where she stood, wearing the same empty expression as Coleman. She did not acknowledge them in any way as they passed.
Fuck. I know what this is,
Heather whispered.
What is it?
Aiden asked. He was not willing to admit it, but he was unnerved by this eerie behavior.
Husks.
Husks? What the fuck is that supposed to mean?
In the early stages of the project, there was a point where this was all they got when they used their serums on corpses. The bodies had been reactivated, but Brain function was almost nothing. They called them husks. I think that's what's happening here. Fuck me. Like this shit needs to get any weirder than it already is. If that thing is turning people into husks, it's even worse than you think. We need to find it.
They roamed the hallways of the first floor, quietly searching around for any clues as to the whereabouts of their target. They were unsettled by the amount of people standing around blankly outside their apartments, clearly having been trying to escape something when they were caught and transformed into empty shells. They found nothing on the first floor, but upon reaching the fourth floor, they knew they were in the right place. More husks stood around, some quietly moaning, others walking around very slowly, as though they weren't quite sure how to do it anymore. The horror of the situation was really sinking in, and was made absolute when they saw their target standing in a hallway, watching them. The three of them stared at each other in the beam of Heather's flashlight, no one making the first move. The figure illuminated in the beam of the flashlight was a young, red-haired woman. She was petite and beautiful, but her eyes were black as coal and had a piercing stare that would make anyone feel uncomfortable.
"Are you here to kill me?"
she suddenly asked in a strange, echoing voice. She appeared to be speaking directly to Aiden.
You have to stop what you're doing here, right now.
"And who will stop me? You? I can sense that you're like me, but also not like me. Do you not despise these fools for bringing us back to this curse? The strange thing is, I've never felt stronger and more alive than I do now. But I also feel dead. I'm sure you understand."
I guess I do. But that doesn't change the fact that you need to stop this. You can come with us now, without a struggle. No one has to get hurt.
The woman laughed a shrill, ringing laugh that echoed throughout the building, reverberating off the walls and resulting in an eerie mockery of laughter coming from all directions.
"The mighty hero, is it? A knight in shining armor? Ridiculous. These people play with life and death and turn both you and I into whatever the hell we are. And here you are trying to take me in quietly. The two of us should be ripping out their hearts and stuffing it down their throats for what they did. What they're still doing as we speak. What's wrong with you?"
This isn't the way to do it. The people in this building have done nothing wrong.
Oh, I know that. I had to draw their attention somehow, and it worked, because here you are.
We're not with them.
I know you're not, but she is. And that's all I need.
Aiden had no time to react as the woman leapt onto Heather at incredible speed and sunk her teeth into Heather's shoulder. She leapt off and stood facing Aiden, smiling.
I can taste it all. Everything. She's been everywhere with them, hasn't she? She knows more than she should. I can't say that's a bad thing. I now have everything I need. I'll see you around,"
said the woman. In one swift motion, she bounded towards the nearest window, crashing through the glass and disappearing into the night. Aiden knelt next to Heather, his expression pained.
I'm sorry. She was too fast. I couldn't do anything. Oh, it's okay. It will be okay. As long as you end all of this, I can rest easy. I moved my girl out of town in case something happened to me. Turns out that was good thinking. Yeah, it was. Fuck. I wish I knew how to help you. Make this a safe place for my baby to come back to one day, and you'll be helping me more than you know. Just end it.
Before Aiden could reply, Heather shrieked in agony and went rigid before collapsing. Aiden felt an empty stare coming across her features. Aiden felt his heart clench in his chest, and he suppressed a shout of rage. he needed a clear head. Walking away from the mindless shell that Heather had become, he was shocked when a single shot rang out when he was just a few steps away. He turned to see Heather slumped over, a hole in her head slowly pumping blood out onto the floor, where it seeped along like some kind of dark oil in the night. She had used the last of her reason to free herself. Aiden knew that his job was not done by any means, and he decided that he would take a detour on his search for those at the head of the program. He now had a secondary target to take care of. Unfinished business. Heather's death would not go unanswered, and his fists were going to do the knocking on the door. Aiden dropped the empty can in a garbage bin as he walked by. Energy drinks didn't work the way they used to. He didn't need to ask why. He had noticed himself slowing down in the last month or so. His bodily pain was increasing. His strength was decreasing. It worried him, but not as much as it should have. From the start, he had the sense that he was running on borrowed time. His body acted strange, and that was no surprise.
Damn, chilly out today, isn't it?
Asked a random guy walking past in the opposite direction.
Yeah, I guess. Pretty chilly.
Aiden replied. He couldn't feel the cold at all, but he wasn't about to say that. Neither hot nor cold affected him. External pain wasn't an issue either. His pain was on the inside. As if his body was slowly wasting away from within. It probably was. He didn't want to think about it too much. That bridge would be crossed when he got to it. He got out his phone and checked the time. It was 8:58 p.m. He could smell that his next encounter with the enemy was close. He had been watching the red-haired woman closely, stalking her like a shadow. In the midst of all her fun, she had failed to notice she was not alone. She seemed to have a strong dislike of the daytime, as she spent her days in an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town, the very same warehouse that Aiden now stood in front of, waiting. He could see his breath misting out in the cold and felt almost glad that he couldn't feel it. This thought was interrupted by a movement inside the building, which caught Aiden's attention. The entrance door opened slightly, and in the same moment, Aiden kicked it in hard. There was a satisfying thud as the woman was knocked back into the darkness of the building. Aiden stepped inside just as the snarling woman was getting up.
You, of course,
she sneered.
Me indeed. I found you. Yeah, well done. What will you do now? I'm going to repay you for killing Heather. Oh, I didn't kill her though. Well, sort of, but not completely, right? She shot herself. I would have done the same. No one would want to live in an existence like that. So, the way I see it is that you killed her. Shot herself, you say? Huh? I'm impressed she had the presence of mind to do that. She must have been stronger than the others. She was,
said Aiden, before launching a kick out of nowhere, sending the laughing woman reeling. She recovered.
Is that how you treat all your women? I'm Eva, by the way. What's your name, handsome? My name isn't going to be of any use to you once we're done. Always the tough guy, aren't you?
Said Eva, springing at Aiden with her own lightning reflexes. She managed to latch onto him and sink her teeth into his neck. He ripped her off of him and threw her aside. She sat up on the floor where she had landed, seemingly savoring the taste of Aiden as she took a deep breath. She smiled up at him.
What a rush. An interesting life you had there, Mr. Aiden. Beautiful wife, beautiful daughter. Perhaps I should pay them a visit when we're done here, and slowly cut their throats while they're sleeping.
can leave sweet little kisses on their necks too. How about that?
The only way you would ever be able to touch them is if I was dead for good.
Then I'll have to make that happen.
Eva exclaimed as she lashed out at Aiden with a fist after getting to her feet. Aiden caught her arm mid-swing and gripped it with both hands, hurling her around and sending her flying into a tall metal rack nearby. She crashed into it with a deafening clang, followed by loud metallic rattling as that rack took others down with it. She coughed and then laughed as she struggled to free herself from the wreckage.
It's that old army training kicking in, isn't it? Don't feel too tough. Men who beat on women aren't tough. They're just egotistical cowards like you.
I don't think you can call yourself a real woman. You're a monster. You hurt and kill others for pleasure. Others that did nothing wrong to you. What they did to you in those labs doesn't give you an excuse for the horrible things you've done. I've been tracking you the past month. Clearly, there is no reason left in your mind. So this is the way I have to do it.
You talk with such finality. You're so sure of yourself. What happens if it's the other way around and I win?
Then you win, and you can do whatever you want. But that won't happen.
Eva then pulled a cheap trick and threw a handful of dirt and bits of metal into Aiden's eyes, causing him to reflexively shield his face with his hands. She tore off a piece of metal from the broken racks and swung it, cutting a deep gash in Aiden's forearm. She recovered and went for another swing, but Aiden dodged it and got hold of her wrist. He wrenched it backwards and the resulting crack echoed through the dark warehouse. Eva simply snarled and yanked her arm free, no doubt unable to feel pain like Aiden. Her limp hand dropped the sharp piece of torn metal as she backed away, and Aiden promptly snatched it up. Eva barely had time to register what he was doing when he stepped forward, the piece of metal glinting with some distant reflected light as he swung it. With a stark popping sound, it pierced Eva's temple perfectly, reappearing on the other side covered in blood and viscera. Her eyes were wide with surprise and her mouth was slightly open, the expression on her face clearly conveying that she had been unprepared for that move. Aiden watched calmly as she staggered 2 steps away, then collapsed and went still. He walked over to her and turned her over to lie on her back. Her eyes were glassy and blank, and she did not stir. Aiden relaxed when he was satisfied she was dead, and sat down on an old metal table nearby. He stared at her corpse, and his mind flashed back to the moment she had bitten him. He could not help but wonder how she had learned so much about him in that one moment. Had it been his blood? Had she somehow been able to access his memories in that way? Even in its strange state of suspended death, his body still bled. He still breathed. He struggled to understand what was happening. He stared at the small pool of blood forming next to Eva's head and had a sudden idea. He wondered what would happen if he were to taste her blood. The idea was utterly repulsive, but it made morbid sense. If she was able to do it, maybe he could as well, though he really did not want to. He got off the table and walked over to the body anyway. Kneeling down, he dipped a finger into the pool of blood and grimaced at it, before placing it on his tongue. He fell to the floor as his mind was assaulted by a blur of images. He heard many different voices in his head. He heard laughter, screams. He was hit with images of a tall, dark-haired man playing in a park with 2 children. He heard more laughter, and what sounded like Eva's voice, but less angry and spiteful. Those images were then ripped from him and replaced with blurred faces hovering somewhere above him. More voices. Then there was pain, excruciating pain, a rush of adrenaline. He felt powerful and violent. There was screaming and blood and death. Then, a twisted sense of freedom, release, After that, for a while, there was nothing. Just darkness. He came to his senses after some time, and a bright light hurt his eyes. He was surprised to find daylight glaring in through the windows and doors. He had passed out for the rest of the night. He got up, his mind still flickering with remnants of the things he had seen. One very important revelation stood out amongst the rest. He had witnessed Eva's escape from the experimental facility, and knew exactly where it was. He wouldn't have to go after Stockman anymore. He would get him too. He would get all of them, right at the source. The images changed between different scenes of chaos as the reporter spoke in a grim tone, staring into the lens with a serious expression.
Absolute carnage here on the front line, as you can see. Please make sure you have taken note of the guidelines on excusing any small children from the room if you are watching. It has been a few days since the last attack on the government medical research facilities, bringing the round total to 4. Acts of brutal violence were carried out in rapid succession, bringing the death toll to over 60 casualties. Lab staff and general workers were wiped out with extreme prejudice, along with private security personnel who died while bravely trying to do their jobs. Unfortunately, the perpetrator is as of yet unidentified, and there are still very few answers to the many questions. It is confirmed, however, that it is the work of a single individual with unprecedented combat skills and intimate knowledge of their targets. I'm here with Chief Brian Williams, who will be giving us an update on the progress of the firefighters searching through the chaos for survivors. Brian? Thank you. You will hear no good news from me either, as my men have yet to find even a single survival in the destroyed facilities. It seems whoever is responsible for these horrible crimes went out of their way to make sure no one was left alive. With the facilities having been built underground, it is extremely dangerous to navigate the sites due to frequent collapses and fires that are difficult to reach. We hope to find someone alive who could possibly explain just what happened here, but are saddened to say that we have had no such luck yet. Thank you, Brian. Grim news indeed. We can only hope that these violent attacks are finally over, as the pressure on emergency personnel is already immense. Our hearts go out to all those who have lost loved ones during this dark time, and we encourage those who are still unsure to maintain the hope they have. The firefighters will not give up their search until all are accounted for. Brian, I will let you get back to your important work. Thank you for your time. Please tune in later this evening for your 7 p.m. update.
The news broadcast promptly cut off by a flying brick smashing through the screen, devastating the television in an eruption of shattered glass and sparks.
Loved ones this, loved ones that, medical research facilities, what fucking hogwash.
Aiden muttered to himself as he sat down again. His breath wheezed in his chest, and he closed his remaining eye. He had not left the battle unscathed, and had been shot, burned, and stabbed. But his job was done, and that was all that mattered to him. He had made sure that nothing was left. His body was a wreck, and he felt it, riddled with pain, his muscles randomly twitching. The unnatural chemicals pumping through his veins were losing strength, and he could feel himself shutting down. He was okay with it, after all. His borrowed time was nearly up, and he had accomplished what he needed to do. He thought of Ellen and Ada, how he would miss them. It gave him a different kind of pain inside when he thought of how he had briefly considered that he may have been able to go back to them. It had been a ridiculous thought and an impossible reality. He knew that they would someday be happy again without him, and it brought him small comfort and great sorrow. He rested his head back and sighed, wondering why it had to have been him. That was a question that would never have an answer, and he knew it. He stared at the shattered remains of the television, and the untruths told made him angry. No one would know the true disaster that could have been. Unknown as he was, they would still crucify him as a villain performing unspeakable acts of senseless terror. At least he knew the truth. He knew that his efforts had saved far more lives than it had ended, and in doing what he had done, he had incinerated all traces of the awful things that had transpired down there, below the earth. How many people had slept peacefully in their beds, completely unaware of the growing doom right below them? Too many. He then smiled as he imagined the look on the face of Heather's daughter when she discovered the money he had left for her.
You don't need to know who I am, but I'm a friend of your mother, and she would want you to have it,
he had written on the note. It was enough to set her up for life. It was time now. His breathing was slowing. His body felt weak and broken. He reached over and took the gun off the small table next to him. He placed the barrel under his chin as he stared at the small photograph he had of him and his two treasures on the wedding day. He wished them well, and with a final, resounding bang, he was free.